Welcome, deep divers, to Antarctica, a place of, well, raw, captivating beauty and truly unimaginable danger.
It really is.
Picture this vast white wilderness. It's been a stage for incredible human ambition, for groundbreaking scientific discovery, and sadly, for profound, heartbreaking tragedy.
And over a century later, the story it holds still echoes, doesn't it? With lessons and sort of lingering questions.
Absolutely. It's a story that truly captures the imagination, revealing so much about the limits of human endurance.
It really does. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the British Antarctic expedition of 1910-1913, famously known as the Terra expedition, led by the renowned Captain Robert Falcon Scott.
Scott's primary goal was clear, wasn't it? To be the first to reach the geographic South Pole.
It was the headline, yes.
But, and this is crucial, I think, it wasn't just about planting a flag. He also harbored this deep ambition to continue and expand upon the significant scientific work he'd begun on his earlier discovery expedition.
Exactly. So a dual mission, a race, yes, but also a massive scientific endeavor woven into it.
A race, as history tells us, he didn't actually win.
No. He and 4 companions did reach the pole in January 1912, which was an incredible feat of human will in itself.
Absolutely monumental.
But they found they'd been preceded by a Norwegian team led by Roald Amundsen. He'd arrived 34 days earlier.
Ouch. And then, tragically, Scott's entire polar party perished on the return journey.
Yes, the whole group.
It's one of those historical narratives that just, it grabs you. We're going to uncover the meticulous preparations, the unexpected rivalries that added fuel to the fire.
There's definitely some tension there.
The innovative and sometimes deeply flawed strategies they employed, the brutal realities of Antarctic survival, and the enduring scientific legacy that emerged from this ill-fated venture.
Right, because there was a legacy, despite the tragedy.
Why did this expedition, filled with such promise, end in such devastating loss? What does it teach us about leadership, ambition, and, well, the unforgiving power of the world's coldest continent? Let's unpack this.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's cast our minds back to the early 1900s. Scott had already led the discovery expedition, reached a new farthest south, at 82 degrees 17 meters out, and made significant contributions. But the pole itself remained unconquered. What was it that really drew him back for a second attempt?
Well, the Antarctic was calling, definitely. But so was, I think, intense personal and national pride. In 1909, Ernest Shackleton's Nimrod expedition had come incredibly close to the pole, less than 100 miles away.
Right, Shackleton, his former subordinate.
Exactly, and that created a new benchmark for British Antarctic exploration. More than that, Shackleton had used McMurdo Sound, an area Scott considered his sort of field of work from his previous expedition.
Ah, so a bit of territoriality there.
You could say that. It definitely soured relations and, I think, intensified Scott's ambition to surpass Shackleton.
But the personal rivalry wasn't the only pressure, was it? What was the broader context? This was turning into a truly global race for the pole.
Oh, absolutely. Scott was keenly aware that other nations were eyeing the prize. German, Japanese, Australasian expeditions were all being planned or talked about.
A lot of activity.
And then there was the elephant in the room, Roald Amundsen. Amundsen had initially announced an Arctic voyage, but then very quietly pivoted his whole expedition south.
Sneaky.
Well, strategic, perhaps. Scott knew this was a global competition, and the stakes were incredibly high for Britain.
To tackle such a monumental challenge, Scott needed a formidable team. Tell us a bit about the people he brought together.
He truly did assemble an impressive group. From 8,000 applicants, he selected 65 men. It was a blend of seasoned polar veterans, some Discovery alumni, and even some who'd sailed with Shackleton.
Interesting mix.
Yeah. Think of critical specialists like Lieutenant Edward Evans, his second-in-command, and Captain Lawrence Oates, an Army captain known for his oarsmanship. He famously volunteered 1,000 pounds of his own money and his services.
Wow, that's commitment.
Absolutely. And the lower deck included tough, experienced men like Edgar Evans and Tom Crean, who really knew polar survival inside out.
But this wasn't just about physical endurance, was it? The scientific ambition was equally huge.
It was immense. Edward Wilson, known affectionately as Bill, was the chief scientist and Scott's closest confidant. A qualified doctor, a distinguished zoologist, and a talented illustrator.
A real polymath.
Pretty much. His team was considered perhaps the most impressive group of scientists ever assembled for a polar expedition at that time. Top minds in meteorology, physics, geology.
So a proper scientific mission running parallel to the pole attempt.
Exactly. And then there was Apsley Cherry Garrard, He wasn't technically a scientist, but he contributed significantly financially too, and would later become the expedition's interpreter and conscience through his writing. This was discovery on every level.
And financing this whole thing. It was a private venture, right? Not like the Discovery. That must have added another layer of complexity.
Absolutely. Unlike the Discovery expedition, this wasn't institutionally funded by the Navy or Royal Society in the same way. The estimated cost was substantial, around £40,000.
A huge sum back then.
Massive. Half came from a government grant, but the rest had to be raised through public subscription and loans. Commercial firms did help out, generously providing free provisions.
Still, a lot of fundraising pressure on Scott.
Definitely. And to maintain order and flexibility, Scott even leveraged his Royal Yacht Squadron membership. This allowed him to impose strict naval discipline and, crucially, sidestep some standard merchant shipping regulations. It gave him greater control.
So, on one hand, Scott's public appeal stressed the South Pole first, the glory, the race for Britain.
That was the big selling point.
But then you have Wilson, the chief scientist, believing the scientific work was the true main objective. He even said, "No one can say that it will have only been a pole hunt." Sounds like a delicate balance.
It absolutely was. Their scientific plans were incredibly ambitious, studying the emperor penguin colony at Cape Crozier, extensive geological, magnetic, meteorological studies, exploring uncharted lands.
So Scott was selling the dream of national glory.
While Wilson was quietly building this foundation of profound scientific understanding, a fascinating dynamic.
Now let's talk about the initial strategy, because this is where some of the expedition's vulnerabilities might have started to show. Scott decided on this mixed transport strategy: motor sledges, ponies, and dogs.
Right. The idea was to use the motors and animals to ferry supplies across the Great Ice Barrier, the flat part, preserving human strength for the really tough man-hauling part further south, up the Beardmore Glacier.
Okay, sounds reasonable on paper. How did it work out?
Well, this mixed strategy, which seemed sort of prudent, quickly revealed a crucial lesson for extreme environments. Complexity often introduces fragility. The motor sledges, for instance, which were quite innovative for the time.
I hopes for those.
Yes, but they proved only briefly useful, failing after little more than 50 miles. A stark reminder that new tech can really falter in the harshest proving grounds.
50 miles. That's barely getting started. And the ponies. I understand they had their own set of issues.
They did. Lawrence Oates was in charge of them, a very capable horseman. But the initial purchasing had been done by Cecil Mears, who knew dogs but apparently little about horses.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, leading to poor quality animals, some too old. And critically, Norwegian snowshoes for the ponies, which could have really helped them on the soft snow, were left behind at the base. Oates wasn't happy about that.
So, problems with the motors, problems with the ponies. What about the dogs?
Scott was initially dubious about dogs, based on his discovery experience where they hadn't performed well. He later came to recognize their effectiveness, especially in skilled hands like Mears, but he still leaned heavily on this complicated, multi-pronged approach rather than Amundsen's single-minded focus on dogs.
Which, in hindsight.
Exactly. Arguably, this mixed strategy, rather than committing fully to one method, was a critical vulnerability from the start.
The journey to Antarctica itself was also fraught with early difficulties, wasn't it? Even before they landed.
It really was. The Terra Nova sailed in June 1910. Scott, still fundraising, joined later in South Africa and Australia.
And it was in Australia he got the news.
In Melbourne, yes. That bombshell telegram from Amundsen, simply, "I'm going south."
Just like that.
Wow.
How did Scott react?
Publicly, he put on a brave face, said his plans wouldn't change, emphasized the science. But his private diary revealed he knew Amundsen had a fair chance of success. The pressure ratcheted up instantly.
And the ship itself had problems.
Oh, yeah. The Terra Nova, already overloaded, got hit by a severe storm. They lost 2 ponies overboard, a dog, significant amounts of coal and petrol. Then they were delayed for 20 crucial days by heavy pack ice getting south, consuming even more of their precious coal.
Not an auspicious start.
Far from it. Setbacks before they even properly began.
So they finally arrive in January 1911, establish their base at Cape Evans, which was a bit north of Scott's old Discovery hut.
Right, about 15 miles north. They got the prefabricated hut up pretty quickly, though they did lose one of the 3 motor sledges during unloading when it broke through the sea ice.
Another loss. And then came the truly shocking news from Campbell's party.
Yes. Campbell's Eastern Party, originally sent to explore King Edward VII Land, sailed east and unexpectedly encountered Amundsen's expedition already camped at the Bay of Whales, a deep inlet in the ice barrier.
Right on the barrier itself. A different approach.
A much more southerly starting point than Scott's. Amundsen was apparently courteous, even hospitable, but Campbell had to return and report this. The news was devastating back at Cape Evans.
How did Scott's team take it?
Terry Garrard wrote that some initially wanted to sail over and have it out with the Norwegians. But Scott calmed things down. His diary entry was stoic. To go forward and do our best for the honor of our country without fear or panic. But the race was undeniably starkly on.
Despite that shock, the critical task of laying food and fuel depots for the polar journey had to begin. They aimed for the big one, 1-ton depot, at 80 degrees south. How did that go?
It began, according to Terry Garrard, in a state of hurry bordering on panic. Progress was slow, partly due to those pony issues we mentioned. The lack of snowshoes really hampered them.
And Scott made a change.
Yes, concerned about the pony's condition and the time it was taking, Scott made a fateful decision. He decided to lay 1-ton depot at 79 degrees, 29 hours south.
So short of the planned 80 degrees S mark.
Over 30 statute miles short. It might have seemed like a minor adjustment under pressure, but that shorter distance would have catastrophic implications on the return journey.
Hindsight is brutal. And the depot laying trip itself wasn't without loss either.
No, the early losses mounted. 2 ponies died returning to base from the depot trip, and then 3 more died tragically when the sea ice they were on broke up near Hut Point. Of the 8 ponies that started that journey, only 2 returned. Their animal transport capability was significantly diminished even before the main polar journey began.
After all these early setbacks, the long Antarctic winter descended. April to August, months of darkness. How did the team cope with that isolation down at Cape Evans?
Well, maintaining physical and mental well-being became absolutely paramount. The hut was ingeniously divided by a wall of packing cases, separating the officers and scientists from the men, but everyone had vital roles.
Keeping busy was key.
Essential. Daily exercise for the surviving ponies. Meticulous dog care. Scott himself spent ages painstakingly calculating sledging rations, trying to get the balance perfect. Intellectually, they kept stimulated with lectures, ponting on Japan, oats on horse management, debonim on volcanoes.
That's quite academic.
They even played football on the ice and revived the expedition's own newspaper, the South Polar Times. It was a structured, rigorous routine designed to keep spirits high and minds sharp through the polar night.
But the winter also brought one of the most incredible feats of endurance in polar history.
Yeah.
The worst journey in the world. Tell us about that.
Yes. That phrase, coined later by Apsley Cherry Garrard in his book, truly encapsulates it. Dr. Edward Wilson, Henry Bertie Bowers, and Cherry Garrard himself undertook this daring winter journey to Cape Crozier.
In the dead of winter. Why?
Its primary purpose was scientific, to collect emperor penguin eggs at a very early embryo stage for developmental study. Wilson had started this research on the Discovery expedition and wanted to get eggs fertilized earlier in the season.
Okay, so a specific biological goal.
Right. But critically, it was also a field test, a way to trial their rations, clothing, and equipment for the upcoming polar journey under the absolute most extreme conditions imaginable.
And what conditions they were. We're talking Antarctic, midwinter darkness, and cold.
Unbelievable conditions. Imagine traveling in near total darkness, facing temperatures plunging to a mind-numbing 77 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. That's minus 61 Celsius.
Just saying, it makes me shiver.
Terry Garrard famously called it 109 degrees of frost, a term that barely captures the brutal reality. Their gear, their clothes, their sleeping bags were constantly frozen solid, their teeth cracked from the cold.
And they faced more than just cold, didn't they?
Oh, yes. They managed to build a small stone igloo near the penguin colony and collect a few precious eggs. But then a Force 11 blizzard hit them. It ripped the roof off their shelter and completely carried away their tent.
Lost their tent. And that's a death sentence.
Miraculously, after days searching in the dark once the storm abated, they found the tent wedged in some rock some distance away. Pure luck.
Incredible. They returned on August 1st, having survived. What did Scott make of it?
Scott hailed it as a very wonderful performance. He was particularly satisfied with how the equipment and rations had held up. Scientifically, the eggs didn't quite prove Wilson's specific theories, but the journey itself.
So what does this all mean? This epic test of endurance, though maybe inconclusive in its primary scientific goal, proved vital for preparation and showcased just extraordinary human resilience, didn't it?
Absolutely. It's a stark testament to the human spirit pushing far beyond perceived limits, all in the service of discovery and, preparing for the main event, the ultimate field test.
While the main party endured the winter at Cape Evans, other teams were out making their own contributions, often facing their own hardships. Campbell's Northern Party, for instance, after that encounter with Amundsen.
Right, their plans changed. They ended up exploring further north along the coast of Victoria Land. But the Terra Nova couldn't pick them up as planned at the end of the summer season due to heavy pack ice.
So they were stranded.
Effectively, yes. They were forced to spend a harrowing winter in a cramped snow cave they dug on Inexpressible Island. They suffered severe privations, frostbite, dysentery, starvation, extreme winds, living off seals and penguins cooked on a blubber stove.
Sounds horrific.
It was. But they survived, showing incredible grit, and ultimately self-rescued the following spring, trekking hundreds of miles back to Cape Evans.
Amazing resilience. And there were also the Western Geological Parties, led by Griffith Taylor.
Indeed. Taylor's teams conducted 2 extensive geological expeditions, mapping and exploring coastal areas west of McMurdo Sound, including the remarkable dry valleys, places that look almost Martian.
Crucial scientific work.
Absolutely vital. They collected geological specimens, charted new territory, pushed the boundaries of scientific understanding of the continent's history. They also faced their own challenges, including delayed pickups by the ship and having to undertake long, arduous treks themselves. The scientific output from all these side expeditions, despite the hardships, was truly immense.
Okay, so winter ends. The satellite parties have done their work, often under duress. Now, the time finally comes for the main event, the dash to the South Pole itself. Scott's plan involved 16 men initially, didn't it?
Yes, a large support structure. Using the motors, ponies, and dogs to haul supplies as far south as possible, specifically to the base of the Beardmore Glacier. Then support parties would turn back at stages.
And the dogs had a specific role on the return.
This is critical. Scott explicitly ordered the dog teams, driven by Mears, to return south later in the season to meet the returning polar party around March 1st, somewhere between latitudes 82 degrees and 82 degrees 30 south. The idea was to hasten the return journey off the polar plateau.
A crucial safety net, essentially.
That was the intention. But as we know, the strategy started to unravel almost immediately.
The motor sledges again.
Both remaining motor sledges broke down after only about 50 miles on the barrier. This forced the men to start man-hauling the heavy sledge loads much earlier than planned, hundreds of pounds per sledge, relying solely on human strength for an extra 150 miles. Brutal work.
And the ponies.
They performed as well as could be expected, but struggled in the soft snow and cold. They were shot as planned at the gateway to the Beardmore Glacier, their meat cached in depots for the return journey. The dogs, having hauled supplies that far, returned north with Mears and the Russian dog driver Dmitri.
Did Mears send any word back?
He carried a message from Scott back to base camp. It apparently noted that things were not as rosy as they might be. An understatement, perhaps.
So they ascend the massive Beardmore Glacier, man-hauling all the way. Then, on January 3rd, 1912, way up on the polar plateau at 87 degrees 32 minutes south, Scott made his final, fateful decision about the composition of the polar party.
Yes. He decided to take 5 men to the pole, himself, Wilson, Oates, Bowers, and Petty Officer Edgar Evans. Not the 4 he had originally planned for.
Why 5? Bowers wasn't initially planned for the final group, was he?
No, Bowers was added almost as an extra man. Scott seemed impressed by his endurance, but taking 5 meant a complete last-minute recalculation of rations, fuel, and tent space, all of which had been meticulously planned for 4-man teams.
That must have caused logistical issues.
Potentially significant ones. Lieutenant Teddy Evans, William Lashley, and Tom Crean, the last support party, were then sent back, heartbroken not to be going all the way.
So the final 5 press on. They pass Shackleton's furthest point.
On January 9th, yes, a milestone. But the psychological blow landed 7 days later, on January 16th. They spotted something dark on the horizon.
Not a natural feature.
No, it was Amundsen's black flag marking his route. Then they found his tent, Polheim, at the pole itself on January 17th. Inside was a note confirming his arrival on December 14th, 1911, 34 days earlier.
Utterly crushing.
Scott's diary entry captured his desolation. Great God, this is an awful place, and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority. The discovery just drained them.
The grueling return journey began, now without the prize. Just the struggle for survival. And it quickly turned desperate.
Yes. Edgar Evans, the physically strongest man, began to deteriorate rapidly. He suffered severe frostbite on his hands and face, had a nasty cut on his hand that wouldn't heal, and possibly suffered a head injury from several falls on the glacier ice.
And he didn't make it back to the barrier.
No. Near the foot of the Beardmore Glacier, he collapsed and died on February 17th, a huge blow to the team's morale and strength.
Yet, even amidst this unfolding tragedy, there was a remarkable moment of scientific dedication.
Incredible, isn't it? While descending the Beardmore, in a brief respite from the struggle, Scott allowed Wilson, the geologist as well as doctor and artist, to stop and collect about 30 pounds of fossil-bearing rock samples.
30 pounds? That's a lot of extra weight to haul when you're starving and exhausted.
An immense burden. But think about this. In their dying weeks, enduring unimaginable suffering, Wilson collected these Glossopteris plant fossils. These weren't just rocks, they were the silent witnesses found with their bodies later.
And their significance.
They provided crucial evidence supporting the then revolutionary theory of continental drift, showing Antarctica was once connected to other continents, a profound scientific legacy literally carried to their deaths.
An astonishing detail. But the real turning point, the point of perhaps no return, came when they reached the planned rendezvous area for the dog teams.
Right. They reached the latitude of 82 degrees 30 minutes south, where they expected to meet the dogs, actually 3 days ahead of the March 1st schedule Scott had set. But the dogs were not there.
Just empty snow.
Empty, endless snow. Scott noted a horrid element of doubt creeping into his diary. They were now facing this terrible triple threat. The non-appearance of the crucial dog teams, a sudden, unseasonable, and dramatic drop in temperatures.
How cold are we talking?
Down to minus 30 Fahrenheit during the day, plummeting to minus 47 Fahrenheit at night, far colder than they had anticipated or experienced on the way south. And thirdly, a critical shortage of fuel, particularly paraffin, in the depots they reached. They found the fuel tins were not full due to evaporation or leakage in the extreme cold.
So, colder than expected, less fuel than expected, and no dogs to speed them up.
Exactly. The extreme cold also changed the snow surface, creating these horrible woolly crystals that caused immense friction under the sledge runners, making progress agonizingly slow. It felt like pulling through sand.
And the physical toll was mounting, particularly on Oates.
Yes. Captain Oates' feet were terribly frostbitten from an old war wound aggravated by the cold. His hands, too. He was slowing the party down and knew it. His feet and hands became, as Scott wrote, pretty well useless.
Which led to his famous sacrifice.
On March 16th, possibly his birthday, knowing he was a burden and perhaps hoping his death might give the others a slim chance, he voluntarily left the tent during a blizzard, uttering those now legendary words, "I am just going outside and maybe some time." He walked out into the blizzard to his death.
An incredible act of self-sacrifice.
Truly. Scott, Wilson, and Bowers struggled on for a few more days, pushing northwards. They got agonizingly close to the next big supply cache.
How close?
Just 11 miles south of One Ton Depot. The depot that had been laid 30 miles further north than originally planned.
Those 30 miles.
Those 30 miles might have made all the difference. But there, just 11 miles short, a fierce, prolonged blizzard trapped them in their tent from March 20th onwards.
Perfect.
Completely pinned down, unable to travel, supplies exhausted. Scott's last diary entry is dated March 29, 1912. It sums up their desperate plight. "We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. Our Scott, last entry, for God's sake, look after our people."
Chilling. Just absolutely chilling words.
It's truly a heart-wrenching end, and the lingering question, the one debated ever since, remains. With all their preparations, with all their ambition and experience, what exactly went wrong? How did it come to this?
Okay, let's try and unpack this because it's complex. Recent discoveries, particularly research highlighted by Karen May in 2012, really emphasize a critical detail we touched on. Scott had left explicit written orders back in October 1911.
The orders for the dogs.
Exactly. For the dog teams to meet the returning polar party around March 1st, specifically between latitudes 82 degrees and 82 degrees of 30 imbeaux south, May calls this a vital order. And ultimately, it was not carried out.
Right. And the reasons why it wasn't carried out form this complex chain of decisions, circumstances, and maybe some bad luck.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it wasn't a single point of failure, was it? It seems more like a devastating cascade.
I think that's a good way to put it, a cascade. It involved miscommunication, maybe some differing interpretations of orders under pressure, resource shortages back at base, and incredibly difficult decisions made by the men left behind.
So what happened with the dog teams? Cecil Mears, the main dog handler.
Mears returned to base with the dogs in early January, as planned, after supporting the polar party onto the glacier. But he seemed keen to leave the expedition and return home on the ship. Some accounts suggest he was disgusted or preoccupied. He also reported that the dog food supplies left at One Ton Depot were insufficient for a long journey south.
Okay, so Mears is maybe not fully engaged, and there's a supply issue. Who's in command back at Cape Evans?
Surgeon Lieutenant Edward Atkinson was left in command. Initially, the shore party was heavily involved in the very arduous task of unloading supplies from the returning Terra ship in late January and early February. This delayed preparations for any relief journey.
Priorities.
Atkinson did eventually set out south with dog teams on February 13th, but he didn't get far before he had to divert. Why? To rescue Lieutenant Teddy Evans, the leader of the last returning support party, who was found critically ill with scurvy near Corner Camp.
Ah, the rescue involving Crean's solo walk.
That's the one. Crean made a heroic 35-mile solo trek back to Hut Point for help. Evans was safe, but this rescue effort pulled Atkinson and the dog teams off their original course and used up valuable time and resources.
So Atkinson returns to Hut Point with the sick Evans. What next?
He was now faced with dwindling time and resources. Instead of going himself, he sent Apsley Cherry Garrard, who was willing but inexperienced and very short-sighted, out with the dogs and Dmitri, the Russian driver.
But not to the original rendezvous point.
No. And this is crucial. Atkinson instructed Cherry Garrard to travel only as far as One Ton Depot at 79 degrees 29 Arabites to resupply it and wait for Scott there, effectively canceling Scott's explicit order for the more southerly rendezvous between 82 degrees and 82 degrees 30 ROS.
Why would Atkinson change Scott's order?
Atkinson later claimed Scott had given him discretion. He also stressed to Cherry Garrard that the dogs were precious and not to be risked beyond One Ton Depot, citing the need for them for the following season's scientific work. Karen May suggests this instruction about not risking the dogs might have been Atkinson's own justification after the fact.
So Cherry Garrard goes only to One Ton Depot.
Yes. He reached it, deposited the supplies, but then faced severe weather himself. His dogs were weakening, supplies were running low. He waited there for Scott for several days beyond when Scott might have been expected.
He must have agonized over whether to push further south.
Absolutely. But bound by Atkinson's orders not to risk the dogs, feeling ill-equipped for a longer, unsupported journey, and seeing no sign of Scott, he made the torturous decision to turn back on March 10th.
And how far away was Scott's party at that point?
Unbeknownst to him, Scott's dying party was struggling just 70 miles further south. Cherry Garrard was haunted for the rest of his life by thoughts of what he might or should have done differently.
A terrible burden to carry. Did Atkinson try again?
Yes, Atkinson made one final attempt himself, setting out with leading seaman Keohane on March 26th. But they only got as far as Corner Camp before turning back, concluding, likely correctly by that late date, that the polar party must have perished in the unusually severe autumn weather.
So it's this tragic combination of factors.
Exactly. It's a complex interplay. Scott herself, in his final message to the public, sought to deflect blame, writing, "I do not think human beings ever came through such a month as we have come through. No one is to blame, and I hope no attempt will be made to suggest that we have lacked support."
A noble sentiment in the face of death.
And Cherry Garrard later reflected, summing up the endless what-ifs, that the whole business simply bristles with ifs. If the depot had been further south, if the weather hadn't turned so viciously cold, if the dogs had made the rendezvous, if Evans hadn't gotten scurvy, so many factors.
After the winter, a search party set out the following spring.
In October 1912, yes, led by Atkinson. On November 12th, they found the tent, partially buried in snow, containing the frozen bodies of Scott, Wilson, and Bowers, just those 11 miles south of One Ton Depot.
And Scott's diaries?
They were found with him. They revealed the full, devastating story of their journey, their success in reaching the pole, and their desperate final struggle. The search party built a large snow cairn over the tent and bodies, topped by a cross-fashion from Trigg brand skis.
Oates' body was never found.
No, just his sleeping bag was found sometime later. He walked out into the white wilderness.
How was the news received back home, and how has Scott's reputation evolved?
Initially, and for decades, Scott was hailed as an unparalleled tragic hero in Britain. His stoicism, his message to the public, resonated deeply. The focus was on the heroism and sacrifice.
But that changed.
Yes, starting around the 1970s, particularly with Roland Huntford's controversial biography, more critical views emerged. Huntford strongly questioned Scott's leadership, planning, and competence, contrasting him very unfavorably with Amundsen.
So a backlash.
A significant one. However, in more recent decades, subsequent works like biographies by Ranulph Fiennes and David Crane, Susan Solomon's scientific analysis of the weather conditions, and Karen May's work on the orders have re-examined the evidence. They tend to offer a more nuanced picture, acknowledging Scott's flaws perhaps, but also emphasizing the unprecedentedly severe weather conditions, the role of misfortune, and the complex chain of events that led to the disaster. The view now is generally more balanced.
So what does this all mean for us today, looking back? The Terra Nova expedition stands as this profound testament to human endurance, certainly scientific ambition, but also the brutal, unforgiving power of the Antarctic.
Absolutely. It's a story of incredible personal bravery, you can't deny that. Meticulous planning in many respects, but also, as we've discussed, a series of unfortunate events, perhaps questionable decisions under pressure, and factors beyond their control.
And while the tragic loss of life overshadowed so much for so many years, the expedition's scientific contributions were truly immense, weren't they?
They really were, often overlooked in the popular narrative focusing on the race, but the 12 scientists on board the largest Antarctic scientific team of its time made hugely significant discoveries across zoology, botany, geology, glaciology, and meteorology.
What kind of discoveries?
They returned with over 2,100 biological and geological specimens, 400 of which were completely new to science at the time.
And those fossils?
And crucially, those Glossopteris plant fossils, collected by Wilson in their final desperate days, provided that key evidence for continental drift. Plus, the expedition yielded the longest unbroken meteorological record from the Antarctic interior during the early 20th century. This data profoundly shaped our understanding of the continent's climate and weather systems.
So the science, which Wilson believed was the main purpose,
Left an indelible mark. It directly led to the founding of institutions like the Scott Polar Research Institute at Cambridge, which continues vital polar research today. The scientific legacy is huge.
even the expedition's namesake ship, the Terra Nova, had a long life after the expedition.
It did. It continued working, mostly sealing and supply work in the Arctic and North Atlantic, for another 30 years before finally sinking off the coast of Greenland in 1943 during wartime service. Its wreck was actually discovered on the seabed in 2012.
Wow. A final echo of the expedition.
Indeed.
So listening to this story, the Terra Nova expedition forces us, I think, to confront some difficult questions. When operating at the absolute limits of human capability in these extreme environments, how do we weigh the pursuit of grand goals like being first to the pole against the inherent risks to human life?
It's a fundamental question in exploration, isn't it?
And in the face of these insurmountable natural forces, like that unexpected killer cold snap, where does the line between heroism and perhaps hubris truly lie? What choices, if any, do you think could genuinely have changed that tragic outcome? And maybe more broadly, what does this whole story tell you, our listeners, about the unpredictable nature of exploration, even when undertaken with the best intentions and the most meticulous planning imaginable?
A lot to think about there. The ifs definitely linger.